Welcome to Lab 5, and in Lab 5 we will talk about directives, or I will rather say custom directives. If you remember, in the first lab I said that Angular is a declarative language, and it's a declarative programming language, and it uses directive to express himself. Directives means, for example, till now we have seen a lot of directives. For example, over here when Angular says ng-controller, that means he means that a new instance of the binding code class will be created and binded. When Angular says ng-repeat, that means over here a for each loop will happen. So in other words, Angular is a declarative language, and to express himself or to achieve that declarative programming, it uses these directives. So all these directives here, ng-controller, ng-model, ng-click, whatever ng- you have seen till now are ready-made directives given by Angular. But what if you want to go and create your own custom directive? What if you want to go here and say that I want to create a directive like this? I want to go and create my own directive called as dev company -copy -write, something like this. So by doing so, automatically over here it will display the company copyright, like copyright 2006, 2007 or whatever, right? So what if I want to go and create my own directive and reuse that directive wherever I wish? So in this lab, let us try to see that how we can go and create our own custom directives, and what are the other things we have to know about creating these custom directives. So let us go ahead and create a directive. So I'm going to go and create a separate function for directive so that we don't mix everything up. So I'll say your function, so this is copyright. Okay. So in order to create a directive, so first thing is, let us go and create an object of directive. So directive is equal to a new object. Remember, whenever I say an empty curly bracket, that means it's a new JSON object or a new JavaScript object. Okay, so this is one of the ways of creating object. There is no new keyword in JavaScript. Okay, and then over here we'll say directive dot template. So I'll say a template, display here @copyright, copyright 2016, 2017, 2017, right? So this template is nothing but what you want to display inside the directive, right? So at this moment I just want to display a static text here, and I will say here return this directive. So this is the most simplest form of creating your own custom directive. But now this directive has to be registered inside your app, right? So over here now you will go and say my app dot directive, right? So I will give a name here. At this moment I will keep the name as company copyright, and the actual code is here, copyright. So at this moment it is company copyright. So over here I will just say company copyright. Okay, I'll talk about why I have deleted those hyphens, and this should work. So in other words, to create a directive, just create the object and then start setting the properties. So at this moment I have said just template. A template is nothing but whatever text you want to put inside the directive. And second, then register this directive inside the app by using the directive keyword. So let us go and run this. Let us see if it works or not. And you can see that there our directive is running. It is displaying the text what we had put inside the template over here, right? So everything is working fine. Nice. Also, this directive at this moment, if you see the way I have used this directive, I have used it as an attribute. So in other words, I have a div tag, and I've used the company copyright as an attribute inside that div tag, right? But also I can go and do like this. I can go and say, okay, this is a copyright, and this is So I can use it as an element as well. So this will also work. It will show the same output, right? So you can use it as an attribute on a HTML tag, or you can use it as a element. Now this element can be problematic. Think for a moment that a new HTML specification comes up, and in that specification they say that they are creating a tag called as company copyright. Even if you see these HTML5 specifications, they have introduced a lot of semantic tags. Semantic tags means, it has the actual meaning rather than the technical meaning. So for example, they have introduced tags like footer, header. So it is very much possible that tomorrow they will go and introduce a tag called as company copyright, and then it will start colliding with your directive, right? So what the HTML team has said, that we will never create a tag with the word hyphen in between. So go ahead and create tags with the word hyphen, and it is ensured that it will never collide with the HTML specifications. Even if you see the Angular tags or Angular directives, they have this word hyphen, ng-repeat, ng-controller, ng-model, right? Now, in order to have this kind of a hyphen naming convention in the tags, we have to go and follow Pascal naming convention in the directive. So here what I have to say is that wherever I want the word hyphen, I should put it as capital. I should put that letter as capital. For example, over here now, I want that letter hyphen before the C of the copy and before the R of the write. So those words we have to go and capitalize it. So you can see that I am following now a Pascal naming convention here, where the first letter is small, and in whichever places I want hyphen, I am putting the letter as capital. So with this, we should be able to run this program. So let me do a Control F5. Let us see. Slow. So there it is running. So again, the output is not changing, but internally, we have ensured that we do not collide with the HTML specification. So remember that whenever you go and create your own custom directive, ensure that it has the word hyphen in between. Do not create directives without the word hyphen. You will have problems. Now let me talk more about this template over here. In this template at this moment we have static data, but if you wish, you can go and put any kind of Angular expression inside this, or any kind of Angular code as well. For example, let us say that we can go and display this customer name right here. So company copyright, and I can display somewhere here customer name. So if I reload this, you can see that it is displayed over here. So remember that in this template you don't just put static data, but if you wish, you can also go and put Angular expression as well. Now many times we want that the Angular directive should be restricted, either as an element or either as an attribute. For example, I want that company copyright should be used as an element. Element means as an XML element. So it should have a start tag, it should have an end tag. But I do not want company copyright to be used like this inside a div tag. So I do not want this to happen, right? So for that, we have something called as the restrict property. So the way we have template, we can say here directive dot restrict, and I can say that restrict this as a element E. Okay, so now what will happen? This will not run actually. So if I go and try to run this, if I reload this, you can see it is not working, right? But if I go and do this, it works. So if you wish, you can go and restrict this directive as an element or as an attribute. In case you want to go and use it as an element and as well as an attribute, you can say E and A. So with this, it will work as an element as well, and it will work as an attribute as well. So basically this restrict has four kind of values. So the first one is the element, or you can either say the attribute A. Or you can either say that this is used only for CSS, C, or you can either say M for comments. So the restrict thing has 4 values. First thing, E as an element, A as an attribute, C for CSS, and M for comments. And in case you want to use in combination, you can say EA or AC or CM. So remember this property here, restrict. It helps us to say that this directive can be used as an element or it can be used as an attribute. Now, one of the places where I've seen directives very useful is to create user controls. I've seen people creating user controls like left-menu, top-banner, right-menu. So I've seen that this Angular directives in a lot of projects, I've seen people using it to create user controls. Now, if you want to go and create a user control, that means probably you have to write a lot of HTML and things, right? So you can't do that inside these things. You would like to go and create a separate HTML page, and in that you create that user control and then call it via Angular. So you can do that here. You can go and create a user control, right? So I can go and say that, let me go and create a user control here. So I'm going to go and create a simple HTML page, where I will have my user control code. So I'm going to go and add a HTML page here. We will say this is user control 1 something. In this we will not have the head, title, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and delete all this. So in this I will just say that this is my user control, right? So I have written some HTML code in a page, and this code I want to reuse it again and again via the Angular directive. So for that, what you have to do is you can again come back here. So this is company copyright. I will keep it as it is. Let me go and create one more function here called as user control, right? Let me not restrict at this moment. And then I can say template URL. So template URL is user control1.html. So you can go and point a complete page in Angular directive and use it. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go and say that first, again, you have created a directive, but you need to go and register this directive, right? So I'm going to go and register this directive here, user control. And the way you can call the user control is by saying user hyphen control. Look at that C capital, right? So I will go here and somewhere above this I will say user hyphen control, right? And let me run this. I can reload this as well. There it is. You can see this is my user control. So you can go and link a complete page, and inside that page again I can go and have Angular directives as well. So here also I can go and say customer name, right? So if you look at the template, it is good for small text. It is good for small code, right? Just to display some small value or static value. But when you say that you want to create a user control, you should have the luxury of writing like this, right? So yes, you can go and create a separate page and link it via the template URL property. But now let us get into some more real-time scenarios. Whatever I've discussed till now are really very basic. But let us get into some more complications and issues what can come, when you talk about directives. One of the things, which I want to point here about directives is that directives runs inside the scope of the controller. It shares the same object which the controller instance shares. It means what? If you see at this moment, I have this ng controller called as binding code, right? And this directive inside this ng controller binding code, right? This user control is running. So the user control is sharing the same scope object, or he is sharing the same instance what the ng controller is sharing. In other words, for example, over here, if I go and put a text box, now let us say if I go and create a text box here, remember this is
the user control, which is used by the directive. And over here now, let us say I create a text box and I use ng model, right? And I bind this customer name. Now see what happens. Remember I said the directives and the controller are sharing the same scope object. So when you see the application here, so let the application run. So here our application is running. So you can see now this below part is our directive and the top part is our controller UI, right? But both of these guys are sharing the same customer object. Okay, so whatever object is created by the ng controller, the same object both of them are sharing. So in other words, if I now go and change over here, you can see the top value is changing. If I go and change over here, he's changing the directive value, right? So in other words, directive and the controller at this moment are sharing the same instance. Now, probably for some scenarios, this is good to have, right? But for some of the scenarios, you don't want to have this. For some of the scenarios, you want that the scope of the controller should be different and the scope of the directive should be different. In other words, you probably would like to have an isolated scope. So scenario 1, by default, the directive and the controller, they share the same instance. But in case you want to go and create an isolated scope, then what you need to do is you need to go here to your directive code, and over here you need to say, okay, sorry, this is the directive dot scope is equal to a new scope. So now what this will do is, this code here will do is, he will go and create a new scope and this complete directive will run inside that scope. Okay, and this variable over here, customer name, will be auto created. Remember in lab 1 we talked about auto created variables, auto created properties. So automatically these properties and objects will be created and they will be attached to this scope. So now if you go and run this, so if I do a control F5, so there my application is running. So now you can see here, he has not picked up this value Shiv. So when I type here test, you can see that only this value is getting manipulated. And when I type here Shiva, only the top scope is getting manipulated. And if you go and run your Batarang tool very quickly to just see that, can we really see two scopes or not? So let us go to our Batarang tool. Sorry, if I'm not spelling it right, a lot of people also spelling it Batarang and some spell it Batarang. So probably my way of speaking is more Indian, so it is Batarang. So if you go here to the Batarang tool here, you can see very quickly, I should see two scope objects. So good. So you can see here one scope, this ng controller is having a scope here of his own customers and customer and all that, you can see. And here is the other scope created which is having his own scope. So over here now, very quickly, when I go and type here, remember auto created properties, right? So if I go and type here, look at this, you can see now a new variable has been created and that is this ID3. So this top scope is now different and this scope is different. So if you wish to go and create an isolated scope, then you need to go to the directive and say that this scope is a new scope. So remember, scenario 1, both of them share the same object. Scenario 2, you can go and create isolated scope. So the directive runs in his own memory instance and the controller has its own memory instance. But again, this example over here is completely hypothetical. It is completely theoretical. In reality, if you see what we said directives are nothing but, they are reusable controls, they are reusable components which we can go and attach to any kind of controller instance. So I have a controller instance called a supplier. I can go and attach a directive to him. The same directive I can go and attach it to a controller instance which is customer. The same directive I can go and attach to an order instance, right? So in other words, my directives, cannot have such kind of customer.customer name or supplier.supplier name, because the time you say that you're going to go and use customer.customer name, that means your directive is tightly coupled with the customer controller instance. right? So I cannot use this now with supplier, isn't it? For example, now let us say I want to create a directive for preview purpose. For example, over here now we have this customer object which has customer code and customer name and all this, right? So over here we have these customer object with customer code, customer name, sales date, etc. What I want is I want to create a preview control wherein he will go and collect all of this data and show me in one text box, so that I can copy that value and take it somewhere else. So in that case, I would like to go and create a variable here called as preview.
So inside this scope, let us go and create a variable, and I will name this variable as preview data. Again, I am putting a Pascal naming convention. Why am I putting a Pascal naming convention? Because we can say that preview hyphen data, so that we again don't collide with any HTML syntaxes tomorrow, right? But now this is not so simple as it looks like. If you look at this preview data will accumulate data from the customer object. But if anybody goes and manipulates this preview data, I don't want customer object to get manipulated. It is only one way, right? So this preview data, I'm going to go and now put it here in this HTML, right? But when in this HTML it is modified, when anybody goes and modifies in this preview data, I don't want the customer controller to get modified by any way, right? So for that, we need to use one-way binding. For one-way binding, we have to say here @. This @ says that data will only flow from controller to the directive. But if any modification takes place inside the directive, will not flow back to the controller. So now in the user control, we have preview data, and our customer class comprises of 3 properties, right? So if you look, this was our customer class, what we had. So now what we intend to do is we intend to map this customer name, customer code, customer amount, sales date and time to this preview data. So now this user control property, we need to go and map to all the other properties. So we need to go and start doing the mapping. So mapping, we can go and do it in the HTML itself. So over here, this is where we are calling the user control. So we will say preview data, preview hyphen data. Why hyphen data? Because remember, this preview data is named with a Pascal naming convention. You can see the D capital, right? And we should follow Pascal naming convention. Why? Because tomorrow we do not want to collide with HTML syntaxes. So over here now I will go and say, okay, over here, go and map customer dot customer name, map customer dot customer code, map customer dot sales date and time, and so on, right? So let us go and run this application, and you can see one more thing. When I did the mapping, I'm using expression. Why expression? Because this is a one-way binding. Data can only come from the controller to the directive and not from the directive to the controller. So when I go and modify inside this directive, this preview data, it won't reflect onto the controller object, right? So I will go and do a Control F5. So remember, for one way, we need to first go and specify the @ sign, and then in the mapping we need to go and specify using expression. So the mapping has to be specified by using expressions. So I've done a Control F5, and let us see what the output is. So you can see that there our application is running, right? And you can see over here he has accumulated all the 3 variables, that is customer name, customer code, right, and the sales date and time. Now when I go and modify here like shift123, it goes and modifies to the directive. But if I go and modify here, if I go and delete this, it is just inside the directive. It does not reflect back to the controller. So basically it is a one-way binding. But this preview is not looking good, right? We would like to go and put a text area here, because this can become pretty long, right? So let us go and convert this to a text area. So I'm going to go and convert this to a a text area with rows, let us say 5 or 5, and columns, let us say 40. And let us do a control F5, and you can see the output here. So you can see now it is displaying the text area. It is looking good, but it would be great, if I can see them like this with enters, right? So again, for that we can go here and say HTML entities for enters, right? Okay, so there it is. You can see now we have a very nice preview here. And the good part about this preview is, when I go and modify here, any modification when I do here, it is only inside the directive. It does not go and affect the controller instance. If I go and modify here, then it goes and affects my directive. So basically it's just one way. But now I would like to take this user control to the next level. So I have provided the facility for previewing. You can take this preview data and attach it to n number of variables to your controller and have a nice preview. But also now I would like to give you a facility saying that, okay, if you wish, you can go and edit 1 or 2 fields. So let me go here and create one more variable here called as edit field 1, right? So when I say edit field means what? If you go and attach any property to this edit field 1 from your controller, and if you modify this field, it will go and affect the controller, and if you modify the controller, it will affect this field as well. So basically we are talking about two-way binding over here. So over here, for two-way, you have to specify equal to. So equal to says that this is a two-way binding. And let us go and attach this edit field with a text box. So type text and ng model is equal to edit fld1. Remember, I've kept a Pascal naming convention. Why a Pascal naming convention? So that when we do the mappings in the HTML, we can use hyphen, right? So I'll say now edit field 1. Let me go and map it with customer name. Now remember that when the field is for edit, you can only map one field, right? So in a two-way binding, you can only map one field, and which is logical, right? So let us go and run this. So there our application is running, but it is not proper, because what should have happened is, you can see now this is my preview and this is my editable text box, right? And you can see now this shiv should have been seen over here, which it is not seen, right? Why? Okay, there it is, FLD1. Oh gosh, FDL I've said. It's 2 o'clock dead night here. I'm recording this video, and you will tend to make such kind of mistakes, right? Okay, so there it is. You can see now. So now when I go and manipulate here, he's manipulating him, and when I go and manipulate here, you can see that he's manipulating back to the controller. Look at this. When I manipulate here, he's manipulating him. When I manipulate him, he's manipulating the top controller. So basically, equal to is for two-way binding, and @ is for one-way binding. So our directive, or I'll say rather our user control, now has a preview feature. It also provides you to edit some fields if you want, right? But now also I would like to provide one more feature in my user control, saying that if you wish, you can go and invoke any method of your controller, right? So one is, yes, I'm providing preview feature, and I'm saying that if you want, you can invoke any method of your controller. So so now I can go and attach any controller method to this any method over here. So for that, again, let me put one more HTML control here, which will be a button. Why button? Because at this moment we are invoking a method, right? And remember, you have to use ng click. So I'll say ng click and invoke this any method. And then again, in my mapping, I can go and provide here saying any method can connect to. So what we will do is, in our customer.js, we already had this calculate discount. So let us go and attach this to him. right? So now you can see my user control has really become international. It allows me to do preview, it allows me to edit fields, it allows me to invoke methods, right? So let us go and run this. Reload. What happened? This one. Why is this looking like a text box? Oh my god. Okay, button. Okay. Right. So there it is. And so if I say click 20, good. Right. So you can see now from the directive, I'm invoking a method of the controller. So from this that is this one, right? So basically when we talk about directives and when we specifically talk about isolation scope, right, these three are very important symbols. So @ for one way, equal to for two way, and if you wish to go and invoke method. So summarizing, there are 5 ways by which a controller and directive will share the scope, or the scope communication will take place. First one, by default, they will share the same scope. So in other words, if you modify the controller, the directive gets modified. If you modify through directive, it modifies the controller. So first one is the easy one. They both share the same scope. Second one is isolated scope. In isolated scope, what happens? Both of them have their own scope separately. So if you modify directive, nothing goes to the controller. If you modify controller, nothing goes to the directive. The third one is one way. Both of them definitely have their own scope, but if you modify the controller, it will send the data to the scope of the directive. But if you modify the directive scope, it will not affect the controller. So again, this third one is again isolated, but there is a communication of one way in between. The fourth one is equal to, where you modify the scope of the directive, it will modify controller. You modify the scope of the controller, it will modify directive. And the last one is method invocation. In case you want to invoke any kind of method from a directive, you can use the and sign. So basically these are the 5 ways of communication between controller and directive. Great. So that brings us to this end of this 30 minutes video. And the next video is on promises and defer. So the next video, I promise I will teach you promises. Thank you very much. And again, I would expect you to go to facebook.com/questpond. Please go there and please do put your thoughts of what you think about this tutorial, so that at least I will come to know, how many people are seeing the videos, how many people are liking it. Is there any concern with this whole series, right? So next video, promises and defer. Thank you so much.